Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Revive Hi-Fi Canada, where we take a look at items that you might find new and used in your area and discuss those items in audio. We tend to try and enjoy this hobby quite a bit, and we like to bring love to this hobby for others as well that might also enjoy it. We truly enjoy listening to music here on this channel and trying out different amps, different DACs, different speakers, of course. And today we're going to be featuring the Yamaha R-S201 receiver. So this is an entry-level stereo receiver made by Yamaha, and it is, I think, from the 2010s, I believe. It is, I'm going to say right off the top here, it's not bad. Not bad for the money. Absolutely not bad at all, even period. So it's really, if you're looking for a machine that just does simple music, this is probably, and you're looking for something very, with not a ton of features like a DAC or streaming built into the receiver, this is pretty much a very good choice. There are some caveats to that choice that we're going to discuss on the channel here today. The first thing, well, let's just talk about the build quality. We also have the Yamaha R-S700 that we did a comparison to. You probably saw that at the beginning here of this video, or towards the end of the music that we played at the beginning. We put in the Yamaha R-S700, and that is a further up the food chain for Yamaha, and further up the chain in terms of more features, but really there isn't many more features. They're both bare bones analog stereo receivers, but there are some key differences, and that we'll talk a little bit more about as we go along here. The Yamaha RS201 again has 2 channels. You can run 2 sets of speakers. The build quality is pretty decent. It's not that light. It's about 15 pounds, and it has plastic knobs, as you would expect. You know, I think that's kind of at the entry level. You're looking at plastic knobs. What I do like is that on the front, I don't know how well you can see this, but you get these nice buttons for bass treble on the front. I do enjoy that, as well as the input selector is a button. I had this receiver in my office, and I gotta tell you, it performed extremely stellar. I was quite impressed with the quality for such a more simple, straight ahead stereo receiver. I thought it did quite well in terms of the musical performance. It has, in the back, it's got a few inputs. I think it's got, here, let me take a look here. I think it's got about 4 or 5 different inputs on the back for analog. It's got a CD input, it's got 3 line inputs and a tape. So it's got 4 inputs actually. And as I said earlier, it can run 2 speakers. What I don't like is that it has spring clip connectors on the back. And I don't know how much it costs for a manufacturer to put regular binding posts on the back. It would be nice to have those on the back of these of this receiver, but you can't have everything, I guess, at that price point. There's a reason why you need to pay more for higher end equipment. But overall, it's still pretty good. Of course, there's the regular AM and FM antenna. I tried the radio on this. It's not too bad for this day and age. Of course, the tuners that I used to have way back 1970s, 1980s, those are a different level because radio was just something people took a bit more seriously, I felt back then. Right now, it's not the most widely listened to as radio. People like to stream more, so radio has taken a bit of a backseat, but still, it does not a bad job on the radio. I've tuned into a few things on there. I had this in my office, and one thing I noticed and struck me right away is the clarity. The clarity on this receiver is really quite good, and I think especially at low volume, we'll talk more about that later, it's very good. And it says it's got 100 watts at 2 channels going into 8 ohms, 140 I believe going into 4 ohms. These ratings are at 40 to 20,000 hertz, and at first when I saw 100 watts per channel, I was thinking, wow, an entry level receiver with 100 watts per channel, that's the same watts per channel as my Yamaha R-S700 that I love. So no wonder it must sound so good. But I think there's definitely a big difference here in terms of course, quality with the spring clips versus the binding posts for the higher Yamaha receivers. We also have to take into account that the 100 watts per channel on this receiver is going into 8 ohms, go from 40 hertz, rated from 40 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and that is at 0.2% total harmonic distortion. Just to give you an idea, typically the receivers are rated 8 ohms, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, not 40. So rating from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz may result in, perhaps, I'm guessing, a lower overall wattage and perhaps a lower total harmonic distortion. I mean, 0.2% isn't terrible, but just to give you an idea for the comparison, the Yamaha RS700 that we love on this channel is rated at 100 watts going into 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and also I think it has a 0.0019 total harmonic distortion, so it's quite low. So it has a clear sound. So like I said earlier, the first thing that struck me was the clarity on this receiver, and the sparkle in the highs was really quite something. There wasn't terrible bass. I can say I maybe had to jack up the bass maybe by +2 on here a little bit. But again, remember that I used that in an office, and the office is small, right? And I didn't have to jack up the volume. And even when I played the songs at the beginning of this video, I had to have it at pretty high volume. And that's where it doesn't, to me at least, it shows a little bit of its limitations in terms of when it goes to higher volume, it becomes slightly less composed. And these are pretty easy speakers to drive that we were running them on, the Acoustic Energy Aegis Evo ones that I truly still can't stop gushing over. I love these speakers. They're not hard to drive. I think they're 88, 89 dB sensitivity, so it's not that hard to drive. But when you get to some higher volumes, I find that the treble can become slightly excessive, and you want to turn it down, and the bass doesn't quite keep up with the treble. So the bass can be a little less controlled as well when you get to higher volumes and sound a little bit muddy. So that's where I find a little bit of that's where it shows its limitations for being an entry level, but that doesn't mean it's a slouch by any means. It still sounds great. But when you get to these higher volumes, that's where you see the effortlessness of, okay, that's a word, effortlessness of the Yamaha R-S700. For the same music, the Yamaha tames that treble a little bit better and gives you a more controlled, tight bass. It's just so perfectly neutral, the Yamaha 700, and at least in my opinion and on my speakers that I use. I truly love that receiver. But this receiver, the RS201, is really not bad. If you want, like, a pretty decent second system or garage or something like that, this is pretty good, I would say. I use a Yamaha in my garage that I'm probably going to have on the channel one of these days, the RX570. I love that receiver. That one actually sounds really good. I think it's 70-75 watts per channel. This one, again, the Yamaha is rated at a much lower total harmonic distortion, and it's rated from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. This one is rated from 40 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So I think that's where some of the power limitation comes into play here. And that's why maybe they have different receivers up the chain, and fair enough for them, receivers and amps, I mean, you gotta get something when you pay a little bit more, I would imagine. So that's fine, I think. But for a lot of people's purposes, this is more than adequate. Like, I loved having this at my desktop. I had it under my computer on a table, and it was playing up to my speakers on my desktop, and it did an amazing job. I think to this day I still think it's the best sounding receiver I've had, or amp for that purpose. I now moved to a small Class D amp, but this receiver, to me at least, did a better job than my current Class D amp that I use on my desktop. So it sounds pretty nice. It sounds very clean, especially again at lower volumes. At higher volumes is where things lose its coherence. The bass is there. I mean, sometimes I may have to bump it up a little bit, depends on the speakers, but for these Acoustic Energy Aegis Evo ones, I didn't have to do that. They had pretty good bass. But again, at higher volumes is where things get a little bit out of control for the bass and the treble, I find, on this receiver compared to the 700. So I think that's all I have to say on this imaging soundstage. I think the soundstage it puts out, it sounds pretty good. But one thing I gotta say though is that it's a little bit more 2D than the RS700. The RS700, you can feel the layers of the music. You can feel the 3D effect of the music. It brings that a lot better on the speakers than this particular receiver, but still not bad. For everyday listening, the Yamaha RS201 is a fine choice, I would say. So thank you again for watching. I wish it had real binding posts, but what can you do? I think there's a place for spring clips for simplicity. If you just stick your bare wire into those, it works out. But yeah, it's got the. I still appreciate that as bass and treble adjustment. I tend to sometimes run this when I turn the volume up. I turn down the treble and bump up the bass a bit, and I find it's quite pleasing. So yeah, that's all I got to say. It's 15 pounds. The RS700, I believe, is above 25 pounds or so. So you can tell there's a difference there, and they're both rated at 100 watts. So take that for what you will, and yeah, so that's pretty much it for the Yamaha RS201. Thank you very much for watching. See you again next time on the next episode of Revive Hi-Fi Canada. Bye now. Thanks again. Bye.